Hello, everyone. Welcome to my review of Mossflower by Brian Jakes. This is actually the second Redwall book in like a middle grade animal fantasy series. So, if you noticed from my last video, I took a break from reading adult fantasy to try to read some easier because of this time of the year, or it's actually the wrap up of my life's been pretty busy, so I didn't really have a chance to read as much because this book took me way longer than it should have. Like it should have taken me maybe a week of my time to finish it, but it took me 40 days. I was really busy, so I did not have a lot of chances to read, and I was actually spending a lot of this time after work just practicing piano to prep for a wedding I'm trying to plan in January. But anyway, so this book is a part of the Redwall series, which I think is really unique because out of all these books, you can read them in any particular order. I've heard a lot of stories of people who grew up reading these books, which I actually never heard of them until probably close to a year ago, from when Magic the Gathering did a Bloomburrow animal fantasy set, and everyone kept talking about Redwall. And so I was like, "What's Redwall?" And I like fantasy books, so I wanted to give it a try. And it's so weird to me. Maybe other people have an easier time to transition from reading adult fantasy or YA fantasy to this middle grade level, and have a fine transition. For me, it was kind of tough because I'm used to reading more detailed dialogue and more serious context. Because here I felt like uh, the how it's written in the dialogue reminded me of the first book because I mean it's part of the same series, same author, with the very simplistic dialogue and not really much of description and the pacing of it, and the good guys are very obviously good, the bad guys are bad, and all that kind of stuff. Which I mean, I don't really think it's a negative. It's just me and my taste. I'm so used to reading this style, and then going to here, I was like, oh man, this is different. But I gotta tell myself, hey, this is more for younger audience, so it makes sense. Because why would you make it overly complex if they can't understand it? But anyway, this story basically follows essentially Martin the Warrior. I mean, it is Martin the Warrior, which we heard him in the first book. And so we follow Martin the Warrior. How is he introduced to Mossflower, which is basically, it will, at the end, because they foreshadow, it will become Redwall Abbey. It will become this place. So this is like a prologue or a prequel in a way. But anyway, so you're introduced to Martin the Warrior, who comes in, and you basically dive into who the villain is, and just like the first book, like the first page before chapter one, you get a little snippet of who the villain is for the book. And here, it is at least I pronounce it. It's like Sarmina. It's the cat who runs Kotar, Kotir, and essentially she's the villain. She murders her father, imprisons her brother, and she's trying to take over Mossflower. And so you obviously get a quick taste of, okay, she's the bad guy. And you get to meet all the woodland creatures, which is so funny. When I was reading this, I could not help think of the Root board game, which I think is a really cute game to play. It's fun to play. There's actually a Steam version online. And so when you play Root, you get the woodland creatures, and they got the cat faction, Marquis de Cat, and all that stuff. So I kept thinking of Root. Anyway, this book's way before Root. I wouldn't be surprised if they were inspired by Redwall. Maybe they read it growing up and they were like, let's make a board game. But anyway, you introduce the woodland creatures, which are of course the hedgehogs and the moles and I think it's stouts, and then you got the weasels or the ferrets, and of course you got the badgers, and then, of course there's birds in it too. And so, sorry, I had to make a cut. That my cat was messing with the door. So anyway, so yeah, we're introduced to basically those factions of the woodlands, and you get the good guys and the bad guys, and how Martin the Warrior is tied in because apparently he comes in, doesn't know that the Kotor, the queen, is basically taking food from all the woodland creatures, and he's like, I'm not gonna do that. And so they arrest him, and before the death of the king, her father, the villain's father, they're like, let's imprison them for X amount of days to show we're humble, but you can't break our laws and whatnot. And you can read this kind of stuff in the back of the book, so I'm not super spoiling it, and I will go into a spoiler part. And so that's how he eventually breaks out, and they meet this other main character, Gomp. He's another mouse, but he's the mouse thief, which reminds me of D&D, because you have Martin the warrior class, and you got the thief class, and so on. And so he gets introduced to woodland creatures and how they're the good guys. He's man, they were mistreated, and so we need to change that. And essentially it goes on to a typical adventure story of they're building up to when Martin has to split off, which in the beginning of the book, and just like the last book, you have the map of the world, and it kind of maps out, gives you notes of like what the story is going to happen or where the characters are traveling or have traveled. And so it was really neat as you read the book, you can see where Martin was going. Which you can say with like any fantasy, but like here, I thought it was pretty obvious because of they made Mr. or Jakes made it pretty clear. He hit this landmark and this is what happened. He hit this landmark and this is what this happened. And it was kind of a typical adventure story on Martin's path, but he also got cutaways to the woodland creatures and how they dealt with Sarmina. And so that was also interesting too. And then, of course, you get like the big climax in the end because it's fantasy, the fight in the end and all that. I'm going to go into the spoilers now. And so I want to dive into when Martin actually branched off. He's been given a quest by Bella the Badger. She's basically that runs the woodland faction. She's like, hey, find my father. With him we can fight and defeat the cat, all right? And Martin's like, yeah, let's do it. And so he goes on this journey with Martin the Warrior, and then they introduce a new character, this mole, and I'm forgetting his name right now. I'll put it here. But anyway, which is funny because in the front cover you see like Martin wear the broken sword of his father, and you see Gonf or that other mouse, and then you see the mole and as they travel. But one of the things like I know I'm sidetracking here, but I thought Brian does a great job. Brian Jakes, the author of like making his world unique, where he gives like accents. He talks about food a lot, like a lot about different foods. There's even a cookbook for Redwall, which I might get one day. I don't know. And I felt like it also can hinder him in a bit because the mole dialogue, for a lot of the times, I could not understand what the mole people were saying. Like if you really sat down and read the dialogue, you can figure out what they're saying. But when you're like kind of doing my normal reading speed and I'm going over it, I'm like, what in the world is this character saying? So I wasn't a big fan when the mole characters talked. It was weird. But he also had another character. They introduced bats because part of the Martin's journey with Gonf and them to go get Bella's dad. His name's Boar, by the way, which is I kept thinking of a pig, but it was a badger. And they would have these little mini adventures on the way there, and they stumbled upon these bats, and the bats would like repeat the last 3 words of a certain sentence or part of a sentence every so often. I thought that was kind of unique. I can follow that, but like the moles, I think it was just too extreme. I was not a fan. But anyway, I really liked how when Martin split off, he got followed by some of the bad guy like weasel ferret people things, and they got to like a swan, and then Martin and company are like, let's not bother. There's a female swan. There's eggs. A male swan's probably around here. So we shouldn't do that. And then the bad guys, of course, you know, the way it's written, they're like, oh my gosh, the bad guys are going to fall for it, which they did, and they got eaten by the big swan. That was neat. It was interesting writing. I mean, good for a kid to follow. And eventually they get to this mountain where Salamandra's son or something like that. They're so weird, unique names. I'll put it here. Where to find Boar. And so like they encounter sea rats, which we knew rats like were basically the bad faction from the first book, and they're bad here. There's not really any good rats. They're like pirates, and so we meet Boar finally. He's like this big, you know, tough badger blacksmith warrior, or he's called like Boar the Warrior or whatever. And they're like, yeah, a lot of smoke and mirrors. They say about this mountain, we just try to keep it alive. And he has all these hares, you know, rabbits like following him around, or like they work for him. And he's telling about his arch enemy, which I put the name here. I think it's like something Fang, which is like the rat captain. And so basically, Boar tells Martin, he's like, hey, it's been prophesized. You're going to come here. I'm going to fix your father's sword. He fixes his sword. And he goes, I need to fight this rat. So they go fight. They get together. They're armored up. They go fight this rat. Eventually, Martin and company, minus Boar, take the rats, the pirate ship, and like sail away with it. And they see Boar die. He gets killed, but he also kills like a lot of rats. Like he's just swinging his big sword. He kills the rat captain, so he gets what he wants. But he dies in the end. And so Martin's like, oh my gosh, like he trained me so much, because there was like a little training section where he trains with sword fights and all that. And like Martin's like a natural fighter, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, of course they sail down and they meet back up with our heroes. Because while all this happened, I know I'm skipping some things in case you want to read it. I know there's like an eel, there's part of the eels, and there's toads they meet. and I feel like I'm forgetting something. Like there's a lot of stops they did, but they're like really brief. So I felt like something and then something and then something. Anyway, on the woodland side, their plan was to try to flood the castle, the cat's Cotir castle. And my cat just jumped while the camera was shaking. Anyway, uh, and so like which they were successful of like flooding it, but it didn't like breach the castle just yet. Like 'cause that's like the climax. So they meet everybody. They got pushed out of their hideout, and a new villain gets introduced named Bane. He's a fox with mercenaries, which I thought was kind of weird. I wasn't really a fan of this part of the writing. I was like, they just randomly introduced this villain, and he's like fitting right in. Throughout the story, they were heavily foreshadowing this eagle or hawk, one or the other. I think it was a hawk, and Angular or something. And I kept thinking, oh, he's gonna get the cat, but on the of Sarmina. But Sarmina also has expressed her fear of water, which I thought was a cool take on cats not really liking water. But anyway, it turns out this heavy foreshadowing of the hawk was to kill the mercenary fox captain, because once they introduced that character, he was quickly helping Sarmina, and then Sarmina kept thinking, oh, he's going to try to take my power or my throne. And so she tricks him to be captured and killed by the hawk. But while the hawk, Angular, picks up Bane and takes him away, he's trying to stab, or he stabs the bird while the bird is, talons into the fox, and they end up killing each other. And so Sarmina actually got rid of that villain, and so his mercenaries are now under her, so it's boosting her army. But now you got the woodland creatures army boosted because of the Boar the Badger's like people, because he had they saved people on the pirate ship, and he also had the rabbits and other people that worked with him in the mountain. And so like these two armies are building up for this climactic battle. And so at this point, I thought it was really cool with Martin, bringing the leaders up to the castle, and there's like, hey, here's your ultimatum: you either leave or we kill you all. There you go. And so, of course, the bad guys are like, nah, we're not doing that. And so their castle starts to flood because all the water built up and started blasting through the walls. People are dying. At the same time, we have ballistas, launching boulders, or catapults launching boulders, destroying the castle. And so the Sarmina's like, all right, she's going crazy at this point, which we saw bits of it through the book of her going insane because she kept thinking her brother was around, which I know I kind of skipped it. I thought it was cool that her brother was he's a good guy, and he helps the hedgehogs because these little baby kid hedgehogs got captured and imprisoned with him, and he managed to talk. The woodland creatures paid this bird Chib to watch and get information, intel, and he's talking to the brother. I think it's like Gingivier or something in the prison cell window. And eventually they concoct a plan to be broken out because they find this other character who I actually liked, and then they kill him off. His name is Mask. He's an otter that can disguise himself with other creatures. So he manages to break Gingivier and the hedgehogs out, but he dies in the process because the cat shoots him with an arrow. But anyway, I know I'm jumping around. I thought that was a cool scene. I liked it better than the Bane character, because I felt like once they took Mask away, they were like, we need to introduce a new character, so they introduced Bane, and I was just like, eh. But yeah, so we get to the epic fight between Martin and Sarmina, which I actually really enjoyed. That's some cool, witty dialogue. Eventually, Sarmina gets, what she feared the most. She drowns. She backs up and just drowns in the water. Martin, passes out because of the wounds from the Sarmina. Because Sarmina, she's a cat. She has claws. Like other creatures don't really have, unless they're... Some creatures have claws. Not every creature has a claw. That's why they have to use weapons like swords and stuff, or spears. A lot of these mammals in the story have spears. The only ones that really have claws that I remember is are birds and cats, in the story. Anyway, so Martin passes out because of his wounds, and his friends find him, and they nurse him back to health. He survives, and then we skip forward. I think it was I don't know how many years it was. It's the next generation where their kids are or these characters have kids, and they're old enough to understand where they came from. And so we learn about how Redwall Abbey was established, because we had this abbess, one of the characters who was the scholar character, who was a support character. She was designing it. And it says at the very end of the book, oh, Redwall Abbey, we can get the red minerals to make the place. This is where everyone can be together and be peaceful, in which they do. And then at the very end, Bella the Badger, who sent Martin on the quest to find her father, had they talked about how her husband was killed fighting the cat, and her son was also supposedly killed. And it turns out he shows up the very last chapter, which is like to me like a big hint for a future book. Again, I've only read the first two books. I don't know anything else, and so the other Badger's around. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so at the end of this, I give this a book a 2.5. I thought it was like slightly like below average. I thought the first book was better, even though I felt the action in this one was better. There's times I felt bored. Maybe if I liked it a little more, I would have finished it sooner. But of course, my life's been crazy, so I didn't get around to it. But I still recommend, like, it's a good like little kids fantasy book. Like, it's, don't expect it to be amazing, but it's okay. It's a good, just a fun read. So yeah, I gave it a 2.5. My current book I'm looking at is Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. So I'll be checking that out. Hopefully I can get more time to come around and reading some more, because I'm still gonna be busy, but my busiest time I believe is over. But I'll still be a little busy. But I'll try to get this one done quicker than this one. And so yeah, that's my next book. I still have my TBR card. You can change and move things around. I'm gonna check that out. I might do V.E. Schwab after that. I'm not entirely sure. I also read some like the free run manga, but I don't really like talk that much about it on here. But yeah, so hopefully near the end of this year, I'll do like a ranking of the books I've read and finished, because I've been keeping a record of what I've read, and maybe I'll do like a tier list of what was my favorite. Even though I gave them stars, maybe I enjoyed, I don't know, maybe my thoughts have changed. We'll see. I think it'll be something fun to do. But yeah, thank you for checking this out. I hope you have a good day. Bye.